guys, my name is Isai Rivera, otherwise known as Foot Dr. Isai. I wanted to give you a little preview, a little brief today about what our Plyometric Foundation program is about. Okay, why does plyometrics help us become a faster athlete? Okay, the easiest answer to understand that and the best way to illustrate that is to discuss a little bit about how your lower extremities work and how plyometrics help them, and how doing plyometrics in a certain way will definitely help and improve your performance on the field as far as playing fast. First of all, when we talk about speed and we talk about playing fast, it's very different from running fast. People can run fast in a straight line, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you're playing fast. Playing fast is about three things: applying the right amount of force in the quickest amount of time, that's one. Number two, putting that force into the right direction. Number three, at the right time. So, in essence, for me to be able to play fast, I have to apply as much force into the ground as possible in the shortest amount of time, in the right direction, at the moment it's immediately needed. Okay? So as we're playing sports, we're going to have different stimuluses that are going to make us have to apply that force. Plyometrics helps us train that maximal contraction time. And what I mean by that, we talked about that first part, the most amount of force in the shortest amount of time. Okay, that's essentially what plyometrics is about, and how plyometrics can help us create better and faster players that explode into our movements. Okay, so when we talk about plyometrics, the first thing we've got to understand is the stretch shortening cycle. And what that means and what that is for us is our lower extremities and our tendons and tissues can act like a rubber band. Okay, it has elastic properties. And the easiest way to think of that is when we stretch something, the wider we stretch it and we let it go, it snaps back. Okay? What happens is when we do a lot of strength training and we don't apply a lot of fast or powerful movements in the manner of snapping like a rubber band would, as quickly as possible and as powerfully as possible, we limit the amount that strength can turn to speed when we're playing. Okay? So when we talk about plyometrics and we're discussing plyometrics, the number one important thing we got to understand is that as soon as I touch the ground, I want to get off the ground as quickly as possible. Understand that when we're doing squats or any type of lunge or body weight movement or anything like that, our knees bend in a different way than they do when we're moving athletically. Okay? So even though I could say squat 500 pounds, how long does it take me to do that? That's the problem with understanding that strength at some point has to turn into power, and that power has to turn into something that we can develop and put into our movements and sports. Okay, and I hope that makes sense for you. So here in this Plyometric Foundations, the number one thing I want you guys to understand is that within the videos that you see of me demonstrating the movements, the number one most important thing we have to understand is landing mechanics, and also the same thing as our pushing mechanics. And so what I mean by that is when we want to start and generate power, it wants to come from underneath our hips. We have to get used to understanding where that is in space within our own body, and where do we push off with, and how do we land. Okay? And one of the ways we can do that is by doing that from just a standing surface. Okay? So if we have a surface in front of us, we want to find the spot underneath our hips. I've talked about to many athletes about the great toe joint, the sweet spot of our foot. So not only do we always want to contact the forefoot or the ball of our foot, but we want to go ahead and hit that great toe joint. That great toe joint is going to be located underneath your big toe where the ball of the foot is. You can actually feel a bone right there. Okay, that hard surface, that's the sweet spot of our foot. That's where we can absorb the most energy and create the most energy. And absorbing energy is one of the single most important things that we can do, because the greater the energy we absorb, the more we can redirect energy into the opposite direction. Okay? Now comes that piece of time. When we're squatting, we're absorbing gravity and the resistance and weight of the bar. Okay? And we're taking a long time to absorb that. Okay? So what we want to transfer that to with plyometrics is we want to be able to absorb our body weight plus how much heavier we get with the time we're in the air, and absorb it as quickly as possible and move it as quickly as possible. What I mean by that is that when we touch the ground, we don't want to go all the way down as if we're squatting. We don't have time to do that within a chaotic sports type of environment, okay? Just because I can jump further if I squat down lower doesn't mean I can do that in a game. You're not in that position and you don't have that amount of time. You've got to contract strongly, quickly to redirect, okay? So when we talk about landing mechanics, we always want to land on that part of our foot. And one of the ways we want to do that, and you can add this to your warm-up in the plyometric foundations, is just standing tall and being sure that we're snapping down on that, okay? So one of the ways that we'll do that is we'll get our feet directly underneath our hips. We're going to drive into that sweet spot on our foot, that great toe joint. We're going to get as tall as possible, squeezing the stomach. We're going to engage the hips, so those are our glutes. We're going to be sure they're squeezing forward. We're going to get as tall as possible, and I'm going to snap down onto that same spot as violently as possible, okay? And what I'm looking for is, did my feet move out? Did I have to do this? Did I do this? Did I do any of those things? That exercise that I just did right now is something you can do all the time to teach and pattern your body on how to land, on how to hit that sweet spot of your foot. If you do it barefoot, even better, okay? Because now we truly get to feel where that sweet spot is on the ground, and now when you put shoes on, you're always aware of where we're hitting the ground on, okay? I'm going to show you that again from a side angle. So finding that sweet spot, tall as possible, stomach tight, hips tight, and snap, okay? Notice I keep that same position. I keep that same landed position, okay? That, when we land, that is the furthest we pretty much want to go if we're getting depth as far as jumping. We don't want to get any lower than that, okay? Now, when we're talking about athletics involving with the plyometric program that you're going to come to, always remember that everything you do is specific to the time, environment, and position you're in at that time. So if we play sports, we're typically in this athletic position. We want to be able to learn to explode from this position, which is why when I did those landing mechanics, this was generally where I ended up at. We want to teach ourselves to do that and not have to jump and have to go all the way down to absorb our body. We don't want that to happen. That takes too long, and we're losing a lot of the momentum and potential energy that we can shoot out when we change direction, okay? So when we're working through this program, like I said, the number one thing we've got to worry about is I've got to tell myself with my brain to my body, as soon as I feel the ground, I've got to leave the ground, okay? Whenever we're doing our repeat jumps. And when we're doing our single jumps, like our broad jump, our single leg jump, any of those things, always understand that we're getting as far as possible or as high as possible, being able to control the landing. So as you're progressing through this 6-week program, understand that if you jump too high and you can't control that landing, it is perfectly okay to jump a little less higher so that we can stabilize and control that landing. Because what we want to do is have power we can control, okay? That's far more important than just having power. If I can't control power, I can't change its direction. And then when we get into sports, that's what's making us faster in these small spaces. We want to be able to change direction, redirect the energy that we created in the first place, not